One of the things that interests a lot of people about the pseudo-Clementine literature, the homilies of Clement and the recognitions of Clement, is the perspective of a long-lost Jewish Christian sect that was devoted to the law of Moses in opposition to Pauline Christianity. And as we see in the Clementine homilies, they are Torah-centric in a sense, but they believe that the Torah is properly understood through the true prophet, Jesus Christ, or Jesus the Messiah, Yeshua the Messiah, and his interpretations. So they're not looking at the inerrancy of the Torah and following it legalistically. They're following the Torah through their understanding to the traditions derived from, or they believed or derived from how Jesus interpreted the Torah. So I think that's significant. But about their rejection of Pauline Christianity, how that works is they believe that Simon the Sorcerer is actually a substitute for Paul of Tarsus. So you have the character of Simon the Sorcerer who's introduced. Simon the Sorcerer is in the Bible, but Simon the Sorcerer seems to be a actual. Well, he's in the Bible, but there's a lot of legends around him, and I think the legends around Simon the Sorcerer have a historic basis. It's not just myths or legends. That this man did found a school of Gnosticism, and there's a lot that we know from about him, or some things we know about him from ancient sources. So, of course, the early Jewish Christians are going to be opposing. They're going to be opposing Simon the Sorcerer and Gnosticism as they do in these chapters. But we do see hints of Simon the Sorcerer being a stand-in for Paul. And one of the ways is there's like a debate between Simon and Peter, where uh, Simon says, "Well, I have a proper understanding of Jesus Christ through a vision I received of Jesus." And then Peter says, "Well," and that's what Paul claimed, right? Paul claims that he had the Damascus Road experience where the risen Jesus appeared to him, and that was his source of his call as an apostle. And when he was going against the super apostles, the Judaizing Christians in Corinth, he says, "Well, you might have known Jesus after the flesh. We know him after the flesh no longer." Paul says this in Corinthians. So Paul is appealing upon the risen Jesus appearing to him in visions as his authority as an apostle. But Peter says, "Well, that's very subjective, your visions." And he says, "Well, I'm going to put more value," Peter says, "in that I was chosen by Jesus Christ and I was received instruction from him directly, not in dreams, not in visions. I was chosen by him to be an apostle, and I received direct revelations from him by knowing him in person and receiving teaching from him directly, not from a vision." So you do see attempts there to discredit Paul and his claims. But when you're looking at the recognitions of Clement in the form that it was presented in Latin by Rufinus, and of course we have the Aramaic translations of it, uh, it, it, the basic reading, the surface level reading is basic Christian doctrine, biblical doctrine, orthodoxy, if you will. But we know that this book, which is the recognitions of Peter and the recognitions of Clement and the Clementine homilies, are derived from a ancient Jewish Christian book called the Circuits or the Travels of Peter, which was written by Ebionite Jewish Christian, based on much older traditions and actually written sources, which the author incorporated into his book. So it's very important, and that is true. We do see little digs, subtle attacks on Paul, but if you just read it, like I said, in the surface level, you wouldn't see it because we're looking at the father of Gnosticism, Simon the Sorcerer. But scholars think that this Simon the Sorcerer character is a hybrid of Simon the Sorcerer, but also in certain places represents Paul and his teachings, which these people claim authority from. And notice in Galatians, Paul says that Peter is the apostle of the circumcision, and Paul is sent by the apostle of Jerusalem to the uncircumcised. So early Jewish Christians had a very strong devotion to James, and then to Peter, and we see this in these writings where James and they're basically, this is a story about Peter, but James also has a prominent place in it. Another thing I want to mention is the section called the Ascents of James. What we see in that is just basic Christian biblical doctrine. If there's any heresy in The Rufinus's translation version of the recognitions of Peter is not overt or noticeable. Like I said, if you look at the Nag Hammadi codices, some of these are the Gnostics would directly and overtly insult and engage in sacrilege and blasphemy and ridicule the faith of the apostles. They claim that they received revelations from risen Jesus in the names of the apostles, but the form of Christianity that we know from the New Testament, the apostolic writings, the Gnostic community of these Gnostic writings found in Nag Hammadi, not all of them, but some of them are very hostile to the normative and traditional understanding of Christianity. And you don't really see that overtly in the recognitions of Clement. But some of the more unorthodox or revolutionary ideas, we see those in the Clementine homilies. So I read Stanley Jones' version of the Aramaic, what they call it, an epitome, which is a condensed version. But the person that made the Aramaic version of the stories of Clement summarized it, and he also sometimes he'd use the recognitions of Clement, sometimes he'd use the homily. So it's a little hybrid version, taking two versions of the lost book. And but it's right now, that, as I mentioned in an earlier video, that's the most accessible version because it's a translation to modern English. It's not like a, I don't know. These other translations aren't too wooden. It's a long book. If you're reading the recognitions in its totality, it's a long book, and it'd be nice if somebody would condense it and make it more available, as Stanley Jones has, to the general Christian reading public. So yes, we see writings of a form of ancient Jewish Christianity that was somewhat hostile, not overtly, not in the way the book exists today, but questioning Paul. And sometimes, not always, but we're reading Simon the Sorcerer saying this or that. Sometimes Simon the Sorcerer represents Gnostic Christianity and heresy, but sometimes he's a stand-in for the Apostle Paul. I think that's pretty obvious in a few places in the Clementine literature.